Hello, Golden Eagles, and all the student athletes out there. My name is Kolby Castillo, and this is another segment of Life After the Game where I show you not every chapter is meant to be forever, but it's the beginning of a new one. And so today I have two amazing guests that we're fortunate enough to come join us and help us out, talk about a very important topic. And this is a topic that I struggled with when my playing days were over. And it's something that I really, really want to help you with, because when my playing days were over, I remember getting out of bed, looking myself in the mirror and wondering, who is that I'm staring at? I don't no longer have that sport. I no longer have that identity of being a student athlete. And I struggled to see who I actually was. And it's a time where you're going to feel lonely. There's going to be a lot of darkness in your life, and there's going to be a lot of confusion. But I want you to understand that there is a way to get through that. There are different skills, different tactics. And I have the two people here from the University of Minnesota Crookston that's going to be helping you with that. And especially during the times right now, with everything going on in the world, there's a lot more pout on your shoulders. And I want to help you relieve that. So here we go. So I have Tim Menard, who's the counseling services director here at the University of Minnesota Crookston. He's waving right there. And the second guest is Christen Schoenborn, who's a mental health care professional here at the University of Minnesota Crookston as well. And they're going to be helping us out with this topic today. So first off, I just want to say thank you to both of you for joining me on the Life After the Game.
Thank you for this invitation, Kolby. And I'll begin by saying this is just a starting point for you as athletes, and it really is sort of an outline or a map, if you will, of potential directions that you may find yourself traveling on. And there are guideposts along the way, and there are opportunities for you to continue your growth as an athletic person, as a person with profound intellectual gifts and emotional strengths. So thank you again for this invitation to talk about some of the things that you will encounter as you journey beyond your world of identifying as an athlete into your professional lives. Christen?
All right, yeah, thanks for having us. I will get started on my portion here for the presentation, but first of all, congratulations to all of you athletes for all your hard work, your perseverance, your determination, and your ability to navigate, as Kolby said, especially right now with everything else going on top of everything else that, is already kind of challenging at times. I'd like to begin by talking about a transitional period and, just some of our experiences with transitioning. I want you to reflect to when you first came to school at UMC. Just thinking about, okay, I'm going to a whole new city potentially. I have all new peers. I might be living in a dormitory versus my bedroom at home. I don't have my support system near me, maybe. I have a new coach. That's a big transition too for people. They're so used to the same people in their circle. So when we think about that, look at all the things that have gotten you through that transition. You're about to graduate now. So what was helpful at that time? Who were your go-to people when maybe it was a little hard? That's a big one. Sometimes we forget about, okay, who is my go-to? Who still can be my go-to as I experience the next change? What are some things that I used to cope with all that change? What was helpful, what wasn't? Sometimes there's a big difference there. There's some helpful things. There's a lot of unhelpful things that people can do to cope with some change. So where we just went through another big adjustment period, I think that's important to highlight. As Kolby said, with COVID-19, those same things, we used all those skills that we had. What are some things that we can reflect on now that were helpful in that big change that we all didn't expect to happen and that affected our whole world, really? So it's sometimes reflecting on ways that we've overcome previous big periods of change can be helpful as we look forward to the next big change and the ones after that and the ones after that. We're always going to be changing and evolving. So what are some things that can be helpful for us that maybe have been before? That's something that we oftentimes work with students in counseling when they come to us individually with, what's the next step? Who am I? What is this identity beyond? What's worked for you before? And then giving additional tools that can be helpful.
And I think that's important, and that because I think a lot of times, and something that I struggled with, right? And I hear from my other peers who are now former student athletes, they were like, well, we never went through, these difficult challenges. Like, this is entirely new. And maybe that is true, right? Maybe it is true, because not every situation is the same. Not every transition is the same. But at the end of the day, they're all changes. And the skills that you use to cope with, like you were saying, Kristen, coping with and how you dealt with the different changes already in your past, those are things you can use today. So you were already successful in making that transition and changes. Now you just have to do the same thing here. And I think that's important, because we do fail to realize at the moment that this is very similar and that we've already accomplished something just like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to note that part of what makes this transition perhaps seem like a greater challenge is the fact that you've identified so strongly with being an athlete, and your identity is shifting. It doesn't mean that you don't change your perception, that you're a highly trained, gifted athlete, but that your perception of yourself sort of has to have an expanded view now, as you transition into your search for your post academic career. Some of you will be going on perhaps to some professional degree programs. Some of you may enter the workforce directly from your university experience. And all of those notes um, uh, sort of are a song sheet, if you will, of what your identities are, because you're more than just an athlete or a teammate. You are a scholar. You are a person that has skills in the areas that you focused on. And you're also going to be entering into new communities. And so you'll be a community member. And we're hoping that the skills that have holistically been brought to you as an athlete in all of the training aspects, the mental, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, physical, all of the domains of wellness will have prepared you for this next phase of your life.
And how do they, I guess that's another, an important question, is how does somebody see themselves more than what they've been labeled for the past 18 years of their life? Because I mentioned it earlier in the video, is that I woke up after my playing days were over and I didn't know who I was staring at in the mirror anymore. Like I just knew sports. That's what people labeled me as. That's what I labeled myself as. And I struggled to see that Kolby Castillo is more than that. He loves to write. He's a hard worker. He loves family. He has his friends. It's not just sports that he has in his life, but there's more to Kolby than just that one particular thing. So how does somebody begin that process of start to think and see themselves outside of just sports?
Well, I think that the question that we continue to ask ourselves as we journey through life is, who am I? Right? And oftentimes in periods of transition, that question can be somewhat perplexing, because I've been so identified in this very narrow area, and so I have to expand how I see myself in the world. You know, I think that if we consider the training that athletes have had, you know, uh, they've probably experienced, you know, a very high level of flow in their sport. That is something that can be carried over into any aspect of life. And I'll talk about that a little bit when I touch on the spiritual components of our continued growth. But, recognizing that we will have uh, well-being associated with our finances, well-being associated with our social lives, well-being that is associated with our continued practice in our different sports. Uh, those things are not going to go away. In one of the resources that we're going to identify, the NCAA has this marvelous program called Moving On. And it was developed by the University of North Carolina, Greenberg. And student athletes were broken up into small groups. And in these small groups, they talked about these questions of identity and what directions they were going to go off in. And we will share the link for that resource for you, so that as we mentioned, this is a jumping off point, and the resources that we'll share with you will help you continue to gather information and build on those resources, so that the skill sets that you developed will be enhanced with this information.
Mhm. And just to follow up with that too, Kolby, sometimes even just taking a moment for self-reflection, with that question, who am I? And that knowing that you don't have to figure it out right away. So some ways that I've worked with students too is like identifying what those value systems are, and where you came from, and even talking to somebody in your family or somebody that you really trust that can also be like, this is how I see you when I think of you. And those things can kind of help us in our journey so we don't have to figure it all out ourselves. But even too, if somebody sees you as a good listener, or somebody they can depend on, those are also parts that can be part of your identity, not always what you do, but how you make other people feel.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and the reason why I have a lot of these questions is because, like you said, Tim, we're figuring out our whole life about who we are. Like you're constantly thinking about that. You're constantly learning things about yourself and going through different changes. And even for myself, with 3-4 years after my playing days are over, I'm still looking myself in the mirror. I know a little bit more about myself, but I'm constantly learning. Like, this is me. This is me. So I have a lot of questions, but I would definitely want to let you guys get back on track with your presentation that you had going on here.
Well, I think I'll jump in and talk about, I think this is a perfect segue to talk about emotional awareness and something they call emotional intelligence. So what is emotional awareness? Emotional awareness is the ability to recognize and make sense of not just your own feelings and emotions, but those of others. And if you think about your experience and your work with your coaches, your mentors, your teammates, you'll identify the ways that you've uh, maybe not associated that term with your skill, but you definitely have developed the awareness of emotional intelligence in your daily practices, in your scrimmages or your workouts, and in your games and in your tournaments, right? So why do we need emotional awareness? Well, it helps with our ability to communicate with others, right? It helps us to be clear in stating how we feel and what we need. It helps us as a navigational tool. And a note on that is when I'm at a decision point, and I consider what options I have, what are the options that give me a sense of serenity or peace whereas weighing other options, I may feel a little disconnect, or I may feel not quite as certain. And so, following that sort of intuition, that gut feeling of what feels right for me, right? So that's that emotional intelligence. We think with our brains, but we also think with our hearts, and we think with our guts. We have different ways of perceiving and expressing emotions, and they oftentimes can lead us to um, a healthy decision, a healthy choice. So what we're looking at here is using emotional awareness as a tool to help us making those healthy choices as we move forward. Okay, Christen, do you want to take the next note?
Sure. I'm going to talk a little bit about some ways that we can cope with this potential stress. I say potential stress because everybody may be experiencing something different. I've worked with some athletes who are like, I can't wait to have more time and sleep in and not have practices 3 times a day and start my career or get involved in different things. And so I'm saying it as potential because some may have a difficult time, some might not, and that's okay. We're all different. So something that's really helpful, and the research shows that proactive coping is very effective. So we're not in the situation and trying to swim upstream and try to figure out, how do I deal with all this? Oh my gosh, we can be proactive in our coping. So identifying some things that might be helpful for us if and when we experience some distress that's a little bit difficult to navigate. I'm just going off my notes so I don't get off track here. So some of those things that we work with individuals in counseling, I'm just kind of pulling it back because this is a normal experience for everybody. And so some of the things that we work on with students is working on mindfulness. So deep breathing and being present in your moment without judgment. That's the biggest piece I want to hit home with everybody, is to not judge yourself for where you're at. Allowing yourself space for, okay, this is different. I don't know how I feel yet. I'm struggling right now. I miss my teammates, or whatever that might be, without that judgment, without that harsh criticism, like, get over it, figure it out. Everybody else is doing fine and you're not. We want to create space to feel what we're feeling in that moment. And, that's a very effective way of coping. Okay, so allow yourself that time. Deep breathing exercises are very helpful. This is very effective anytime, but especially when we're experiencing more distress and maybe even a little bit of panic, is taking a moment. You can close your eyes, get in a comfortable, safe environment, and just checking in with yourself, taking some deep breaths in, holding it for a count of 4 and releasing. That brings down that cortisol stress hormone that we have in our body to help regulate our body. It's called emotional regulation. And so that's a very helpful tool that we oftentimes forget is, are we breathing right now? Or maybe we need to take some deep breaths. Very effective. So those are, some simple things that we do go through. Sometimes we do grounding techniques, which is identifying our 5 senses. It helps bring us to that present moment instead of worrying about the future and the what ifs, or about the past. I coulda, shoulda, woulda kind of things. It just allows us to be present. And that's really important too. Something I'm very passionate about is called self-compassion. That's an area I work on with all my students, is how are we treating ourselves during these times? What are we saying to ourselves? Are we being really negative to ourselves? Are we saying really mean things? And so giving an opportunity to say, what would you say to the person you care about most in the world? Who is this person? What would you tell them if they came to you with all of this? Would you tell them to knock it off and to get over it? Or, being really harsh to them? And oftentimes that answer is no. I would support them. I would give them options. I would listen, and I would comfort them. Self-compassion is doing that same thing, but with yourself. We're oftentimes really mean to ourselves, and that's something that we all continue to work on. We're our worst critic. And so while you're experiencing a potential transition is, okay, am I allowing myself space to just say this kind of sucks and this is hard? Or am I being really hard and mean to myself for experiencing these things that are normal? So that's something I think can be transferable for anything. You know, a new job and not knowing what to do right away. We're really hard on ourselves, right? So any kind of thing that you're experiencing, just be mindful of, what am I saying to myself? How am I treating myself in this? It's really important. I know I can't go through all the skills with everybody, but there's so many different ways of coping. Sometimes I'm even like, what do you like to do? What helps you relax? What makes you laugh? Those are important things too. And physical activity is a huge coping strategy. Even if it's not like going to the gym, you could just go outside and look at the leaves or go on a walk. Just listen to music, do whatever helps you, make you feel better. And allowing yourself time.
Is there like a quick breathing exercise that maybe you could share, or even a video that you know of that, like, hey, go check this video out, or we could just share it here? Like, what is a quick breathing exercise they can do just to really get into that mindfulness and really let their thoughts flow?
Yeah, we can definitely.
Let me share this one that I use quite often. This is one that I go to myself, and it's called Wise Mind Body. It's a YouTube, and there are a number of excellent meditations, and Christen has a beautiful one that's dedicated to self-compassion. This one is to help us with anxiety and stress, and it really is just focusing on our breathing and breathing in and breathing out, and just watching sort of what mind does and how mind takes us away from the present moment of focusing on our breath. And the guide in this meditation just gently brings us back to, okay, you may have noticed that your mind has taken a little journey right now. Just come back without judgment and gently just regain your focus on breathing in and breathing out. And it's a beautiful 9-minute and 22-second experience. And the more individuals practice this kind of meditation, the better they will be at noticing those times in their day when they are projecting into a future time that doesn't exist with some anxiety and worry, or looking back to a time that no longer exists with some regret, or whatever the negative emotion that rises up might be, because we're just focusing on the moment, on this only now moment. And this meditation is one that does a really good job of that.
And that's interesting, because I think a lot of people, when they think of meditation or these breathing exercises, they're thinking, oh, it's going to take like an hour. But you just showed me a 9-minute video, and you can even do it in less than that.
Yeah.
And I'm actually reading this book called Think Like a Monk, who the author is a former monk. He was a monk for like 3 years. And there's an interesting couple lines in there that he talks about when you're born and when you die. The first thing you do is breathe. The last thing you do is breathe. And throughout your life, what changes? Everything else in your life changes, but breathing is the one constant thing. And when you get angry, your breath changes, the way you breathe. So it's an important thing to understand. Like, breathing controls a lot of different things. If you can get control of that, you can really start to control a lot of other things that's going on in your life with emotions and different things like that. So I'm glad we could share with them, a couple breathing exercises and how that can actually be helpful for them.
Right, and I mentioned earlier the concept of being in flow. And this meditation and meditations like this can help us recognize that we can be in flow all the time. The only reason that we aren't is because we're distracted by a thought that takes us away from this present moment, away from our breath, away from being in contact with that flow. And the experience of flow, every athlete knows that. When you're in the game and you're not in your head, you rely on muscle memory, and you just trust that things are going to happen the way they're supposed to happen. And then you make a mistake and you all of a sudden start judging yourself and you start criticizing yourself, and all of a sudden you go down that rabbit hole in your head and you're out of flow. And that happens to us every day, every day. So the more we can stay in contact with this sense of intentional awareness, and that really is, uh, when I talk about spirituality, that's kind of what I identify as a connection to um, my spiritual life, is that ability to stay as present as I can and be in flow, and not oppressed by negative patterns of thought. Yeah, yeah. Good reference to that book. It's one of the books that I have on my huge bucket list.
I'm about 4 chapters in. I started probably on Sunday, and it's
Yeah.
something that I try to 15 minutes, the first 15 minutes of my day, I like to start off by reading that, just because it's a lot of positivity in there, and it's a lot of mindfulness. He does a lot of exercises in between chapters. So definitely, for the people watching this, if you want a good book to start off to help you find inner peace and purpose every day in your life, it's definitely one of those great books that you should add to your list.
Mhm. There is also a resource through the Center for uh, Healing and Spirituality. It's connected with the University of Minnesota, and the person that directs the program there does mindfulness presentations across the system and throughout the country, is one of the experts on mindfulness. And she did a presentation for us a number of years ago for our professional development day, and she quoted a gentleman named Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, and that's JONKABATZINN. And he sort of is the guru for mindfulness as it's applied in medical practice. And his research indicates that 1 minute of mindfulness meditation, focusing on breathing in and breathing out, changes our brain. It actually has an influence in the ability for our brain to heal neural connections. So there is a scientific research-based evidence that strongly supports the practice of mindfulness for well-being. Okay, I think what I'd like to talk about is um, there is an opportunity for all of us as we transition to um, our professional lives to continue building on a wellness program that we've been coached in throughout our athletic experience. So, you can leave the university and go into the next phase of your life, and you can look for a coach, you can look for a mentor, you can look for someone that can help you be accountable with setting goals and achieving goals that you've outlined for yourself. You can create a schedule. Your life has not been under your own under your own schedule. Your calendar is governed by when you train, when you practice, when you have games, and when you travel, and when you recover. There's some rehab involved with that. So you get a chance now to build a schedule of your own, and to incorporate that sense of being in a routine into your new life, right? I think a very it's for me, it's one of the gifts that has helped me um, achieve the successes that I've achieved in my life. Um, uh, and I think continue to explore ways that you can use your calendar, that you can, use scheduling time for work, for play, for working out, for discovering. And one of the pitches that we make in our counseling services office is, discover your joy. And for some of you, it may be remembering what you were passionate about outside of your sport. It may be music, it may be theater, it may be doing community service, it may be working with animals or children or some other aspect, but you have now an opportunity to explore some of those things. There's also the sense that all through your athletic experience, you've been playing towards your strengths, right? So now you're going to explore what areas are your other strengths. Are you a good communicator? Are you a good relator? Are you someone who helps people make connections? Are you a person of strong beliefs? If you haven't done, the strengths test, I'd strongly recommend taking a look into finding out what your top strengths are so that you can work from a point of your strengths. It really is on the concept of starting from 0 going to 100. When you start with your strengths, you're starting at 50, 60% rather than starting at the very beginning. So, use that as another tool as you continue to make progress with forming the vision of what your future person will be. Okay. Christen?
You kind of covered, that was from the Moving On program, which was really helpful. The last thing I would like to just suggest is to talk to people who have graduated not too long before you, or friends that maybe have played at other institutions, or even people that work at UMC. Kolby, you're a former athlete, and so you're a great resource to ask questions to, how was your transition? What did you do that was helpful? Do you have any suggestions? Communicating and asking for help is okay. And obviously through our office too, it's okay to come and ask for help on, identifying some of these pieces. But yeah, asking those teammates. And we made a suggestion too, Kolby, to maybe have some former alumni from UMC to come and, that have recently graduated and gone through all this change. This was helpful. This was not helpful. This is something that I would encourage you to do, or all those pieces. We can always learn from other people too on things that can be helpful.
That's a brilliant note. Our alumni offices would be happy to connect you with individuals that are former Golden Eagle athletes that are excelling in their fields, and find out from Brandy Chafee who you might connect with to get some ideas. As Christen mentioned, use those connections that you have that are built in as part of the Golden Eagle athletic family. And I know that you will just find nothing but richness in those communications. Yeah. I'd like to share a screen with you all now. And this is one of the resources that Christen and I have been using as we prepared for this presentation. And as I mentioned, this is the NCAA website, and this is one of the discussions when the playing days end. what comes after graduation, how to leave college sports without losing yourself. Very important note. So please take a look at this website. There's some profound insights. There's some wonderful stories that are connected with former athletes who've gone on with great success. The other share that I would like to uh, make with you is this Moving On website. And let me share that now. Okay. There we go. So if you notice, the title in the URL is athletesmovingon.org. And so movingon.org is the organization that the University of North Carolina Greenberg's mental health specialist with a research grant from the NCAA developed. So this is a program that's a multi-module program. I think there are 4 or 5 different modules in the program that I recommend that you consider taking a look at. There are some very rich transition stories, a wide variety of former athletes, and sort of how they have successfully transitioned into their graduate programs and professional life. There's an emphasis on fitness and physical activity and the importance of maintaining your connection with that. Please take a look at that. Nutrition also is strongly emphasized in this program. And, if you notice as athletes, you have a certain sort of nutrition program to help you to build muscle, to stay strong, to stay resilient. And that's probably going to need some modification if you're not as physically active as you've been in the past. So this program will talk about the benefits of healthy eating and how, since you're not expending as much energy, how you're going to adapt your nutrition to, the new levels of energy that you're expending. So please do take a look at these resources. They're excellent resources that will help you as you continue to figure out your game plan, right? And that's what it is, right? You meet with your coach and you meet with your team captains and you have a game plan for how you're going to win. Well, these resources will help you form game plans for your winning as you continue your successes moving on.
Well, thank you, Tim and Christen, for joining me on this segment. I know there's a lot of great information they'll be able to take away, and I think it's just important. I mean, a couple key topics I took away is one, that you shouldn't ignore these feelings. I think you should be mindful of them. You should let them flow, understand what you're feeling, and use that to your advantage to help you move forward. Another thing you talked about again is breathing exercises. Whether it's a minute, 9 minutes, taking some part of your day to just breathe, to control that breathing, let things flow again. And also to understand that you've already been successful in these transitions. It's a new, different transition, but you've accomplished similar things and you already have those tools to move forward. And the way I think about it is, our whole life, our life as a metaphor. We've been co-pilot. We've been driving it, but we've had our coaches and the structure to help us drive this car as we navigate through life. And now that sports is gone, your coach is gone, your structure is gone. You no longer have that GPS helping you show where you have to go. But now you're in control of the wheel. You're fully in control of the wheel. And when you start to understand that you're more than just an athlete, you'll be able to understand what your values are, what the end game is, and you'll be able to take control of that wheel and really navigate where you want to go in life. So whether you're listening to this, whether you're going through the transition now, or you're going to be going through the transition later on, I just want you to know it's possible. there are many other people, many former student athletes out there who can tell you there is life after the game. Control what you can control. Don't ignore those emotions. And trust me, you'll be in the same seat saying there is life after the game.